Goshen. Ve'oisa korov Eli. Ata ubanecha ubnei banecha ve'tzoincha ubkorcha ve'chol asher loch. You, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, your cattle, and everything that is yours is going to be near me. So clearly he tells them everybody is going to come. We're going to be near each other. But how near? Not in the same neighborhood, not in the same cul-de-sac, not on the same street. We are going to be close enough that we can see each other, but you are going to be in this secluded area, which is called the land of Goshen. And why is he choosing necessarily a specific place called Goshen? So many commentaries write. Ramban Maimonides clearly says that Yosef knew that his father is not going to want to come down there if he lives in the capital of the kingdom. He's going to be on, on Government Street where his son is. After all, his son was second to king. He was running the country, and he doesn't see his father. He knows actually his father is going to refuse moving to a place that he has to be there where the business is taking place. So he says, okay, don't worry about it. You're going to be at a suburb called Goshen. Matter of fact, Rabbi Mordechai, another classic commentator, writes that Yosef knew that Jacob would not want to move into Egypt per se, because he knew what kind of great children he has, talented boys, and for sure the government is going to draft them to very specific jobs, and before you know it, they're going to get very involved in that which takes place in Egypt, and that is what Yaakov is not going to want, and therefore he is suggesting Goshen. At the same time, what happens is that when it's being told to Paroi, as you see on verse 16, when the news was heard into Paroi's house, that what? That Bo Ache Yosef, people were saying that Joseph's brothers have come. This news was pleased in the eyes of Paroi. Paroi was happy to hear about it. And the next thing is that Paroi tells Yosef in verse 17, Paroi says to Yosef, tell your brothers, this is what you should do. Load up your animals with grain and go to bring them to the land of Canaan, and then fetch your father and bring him down here, says Paroi to Yosef. And then what? Ve'etno lochem estuv eretz Mitzrayim. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. Says Rashi, what is the best of the land of Egypt? This is the land of Goshen. So Paroi is offering the best and choicest part of the country to Bnei Yisrael, to Yaakov, and this is Goshen. The story continues. They go down to Canaan. Yaakov hears the news. We have the list of the 70 members of the family. And comes chapter 46, verse 28. Before he's making his way to Egypt, says the verse, that Ves Yehuda sholach lefanov el Yosef. Jacob sent Yehuda ahead of him. Lefanov means ahead of him, before him. Where? To Yosef. Goishno. To Goshen. lehoirois lefonov Goshno, to direct them to Goshen. What is directing to Goshen means? So Rashi brings from the Medrash two different interpretations. Number one, lehoiroi simply means to pave the road, not physically paving the road, but to finding out the directions, making sure that there is a nice place to settle. Because after all, I'm coming with 70 members, a family, a big mishpucha, and I don't know what this Egypt place is and what the Goshen place is. So he's sending his trusted son, a strong boy, a responsible boy, Yehuda. He said, you go ahead, go down there, check it out, prepare the place for us. That's called lehoirois lefonov. Rashi also says from the Medrash that the word hora'ah means instruction. And what does instruction have to do, Yehuda, to bring instruction into Goshen? Says Rashi that lehoirois means to open a school, to open an academy, that once we arrive, the children will have where to go, to study, a settled place, to learn and to teach. What lehorot, like a teacher in Hebrew, is called what? More, a teacher. Lehaskin loy based Talmud is what the Medrash uses the word. A house of study, Talmud. Just like they had Shem V'Aver, they had previous yeshivas. It's not going down there before there's a yeshiva established, which is, by the way, in parentheses, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, he was arrested by the communists. First, he was sentenced to death, and then, with Hashem's help, it was changed over to a punishment of exile, and he was exiled to a city called Kostroma in Russia, which is very far from St. Petersburg, where he lived at that point. Before he moved to Kostroma, he sent a chassid ahead of him called Reb Michal Dvorkin, was the name of the chassid. And he says, I want you to take the Ilya train, try to get a few kids, and start a cheder. So before I go down there, there's already a cheder in Kostroma. Just like Yehuda, when I had to Yaakov to open a cheder in Goshen, that's what they're going to have in Kostroma before coming down. So clearly, he says, we are going to have a school in Goshen. Goshen ends up to be the place of this very dramatic, emotional meeting between Yosef and his father. As the verse continues, Vayoboyu out of Goshen, they came to the land of Goshen, and Yosef, Vayeso Yosef Markaftoi, Vayal Likras Yisrael Oviv Goshno. Joseph earnest his chariot, and he went up to Goshen. Goshen, I guess, was up. Or Rashi says one thing, he became uplifted, but he also went physically up to meet Israel, his father. And when Joseph appeared before his father, Vayipol al Tzavorov, Vayevch al Tzavorov, he fell on his neck, and he wept on his neck. And that's the rest of the story. So who are they meeting? Who is the first meeting of Yaakov and Israel?
Goshen.
In Goshen, the place where Yaakov is going to live for the next 17 years. It is passing. Yosef tells his brothers, you're going to meet Paroi. When you meet Paroi, make sure to tell them that you are in what kind of profession do you have? Your profession is shepherds. The Egyptians did not appreciate shepherds, and you should tell them, and that's what's going to entice them to get you to dwell in Goshen. As you see on verse on verse 34, the last verse of chapter 46, you should say that your people are men of livestock, Va'avurteishvu be'eretz Goshen. So in order you should do to in order to live in the land of Goshen, because all shepherds are to'avas Mitzrayim. Shepherds are abhorrent to the Egyptians, since they worship the sheep. Rashi says, and they actually come to Paroi and they tell him that we are shepherds. You see the next chapter, verse 4. We want to dwell in Goshen. And Paroi says, Eretz Mitzrayim lefonecho hi, on verse 6. Very clearly, the land of Egypt is open before you. Oshe v'savicha v'sachecho, yeshvu beretz Goshen. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. It only says, if you know there are capable men amongst them who are good to their occupation of tending sheep, sometimes you should make them livestock officers over my sheep. I'm sorry, sometimes mikna shali. Fine. This is how the story continues. It goes till the end of the Parsha, and then you have the last verse of this Parsha. Last verse. Take a look at the last verse. Verse 27. What does the Torah say? Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Goshen. Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Goshen. The Jewish people settled in Egypt, be'eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt, be'eretz Goshen, in the land of Goshen. Rashi says it's not two separate lands, the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen. And in the land of Egypt, where in the land of Egypt was that part called Goshen. By Ochazubo, and they acquired property there, became owners, not strangers. They made themselves a living there. Vayifru vayirbu mehoit, and they were fertile, and their population increased very rapidly. With this, we conclude Parshat Vayigash. The Yidden are settled in Goshen, and they're living a good life in Goshen. Story of Goshen. Later, even if you come to Parshat Vayichi, when they go to Jacob's funeral, so it says that they all went, everybody went to bury Yaakov, the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, the elders of Egypt. On chapter 50, verse 7 and 8, it says they all went to visit the funeral, and the only ones who were left, it says, Raktapa mutzoinum korom, only their small children, young children, flocks and cattle, ozvu be'eretz Goshen, was left in the land of Goshen, which means that everybody is living in Goshen. When it comes to the funeral, 17 years later, they go to Israel, they all traveled on this big procession, leaving their small children in Goshen to come back in Goshen. Matter of fact, many, many, many years later, and we're going to come to Parsha Shmot, and we're going to be introduced to the 10 plagues, and we're going to learn about the Makkos. This is already many years, over 100, over 150, over 200 years in Egypt. They are still living in the same neighborhood, Goshen. Where do you see it? When it comes to these plagues, or some of the plagues, it says clearly that Goshen was spared from the plague, right? That in Goshen nothing happened. For example, the wild beasts. All right, says in the verse, "Veifleti bayom hahu et eretz Goshen asher ami oimed aleo lebilti eyoy shom oroiv leman teda ki ani Hashem Elokeinu." On that day, Hashem said, "I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people remain, so that there will not be any harmful beast there, in order you should know that I am God. So clearly, 200 years later, they're still in Goshen. Comes the plague of Oreb everywhere, not in Goshen. Goshen is a closed down area for the wild beasts. They cannot come into Goshen. Same thing when it comes later to the hail. Exactly. So it says here again that I'm going to send the hail everywhere. There was a borrow, there was a hail, but not in Goshen. Goshen was spared. Darkness too. I don't think if it's mentioned specifically, but could be. Anyway, the point is that clearly Goshen is like getting this great attention in this Parsha. And the question is there anything what we know about Goshen and why was Goshen so important?
Is there a Goshen? Do we know where Goshen was today?
I will tell you soon about something interesting Goshen.
Yeah, it's up. It's under the Mediterranean, it's south of Gaza.
We will see. The question is, first of all, what is special about Goshen and why is it that Jacob and his children were convinced to come down to Egypt knowing once they're going to settle in the land of Goshen? So simply, like we said before, Goshen is further than where the main population of Egypt is. Okay? It's not in the heart of Egypt. For the Jewish people, it meant we're going to be living in Egypt, but at the same time, we can also be living our own lifestyle. We're going to be separated from them. We don't have to mingle and mix with the regular Egyptians. And there's actually the commentary of the Ralbag, Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, a famous commentator on the Chumash. He counts up like 4 reasons. He says, first of all, it was a place of good pasture in Goshen. Number 2, even Pari referred to it as the best of the land. It makes sense to live in a place which Pari calls Meitav Oretz. Number 3, you're not mixed in this big city that, some live here, some live there, everybody's scattered around in the city like this. You're more concentrated, like ghetto style, shtetl style population, which is leads to number 4. Again, the same idea. Let's keep our identity. Let's keep our traditions. Let's keep our culture, and not get mixed, integrating with Egypt. But then we have an interesting medrash. The medrash is brought down in the Das Keni Balatoisfos, because of a collection of early medrashim. And it actually goes back to a medrash called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. It's like a Talmudic medrash, the same authority of the Talmudic sages. Named in the name of the Tana, the sage Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha. Says Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha, Sarah, our matriarch Sarah, Avraham Avinu's wife, was taken to the house of Pharaoh. You all remember this story. Parsha Lech Lecha. She was taken, says the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, says Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha, she was taken on the night of Passover, which will later become the night of Passover, is the night that Sarah was taken to Pharaoh's house. Hashem brought on that Pharaoh great inflictions, corresponding to the great inflictions which Egypt is going to get the night of Passover, leading to the exodus of the Jews of Egypt. But then says Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha that Pharaoh was crazy over Sarah. He really wanted to marry her. And he knew it's impossible because Hashem is making it clear that it's not happening. There is inflictions, there is pain, there is plagues. But nevertheless, Pharaoh wanted to express his interest in Sarah. And as the verse says, he actually showered her with a lot of gifts. He wrote a contract. And the contract said that Eretz Goshen, the land of Goshen, is being given to you, Sarah, as your personal inheritance. Says the Medrash that you know why the Jewish people were so excitingly happy to move to Goshen? Because Goshen is a place which belonged to their Baba, to their grandmother, Sarah. And coming to Goshen, a place which was legally transformed to Sarah, gave him the confidence and the good feeling of not being strangers, immigrants, as foreigners. Whatever you feel when you move to a new location, they felt much more comfortable knowing we are actually going back to the same part of land what was granted as a document to our grandmother. As a matter of fact, the Medrash continues when Yehuda was sent by Yaakov ahead of time to pave the road to Goshen. Yaakov made sure to send with them that contract. The Medrash calls it a ketubah contract, like a marriage contract. Not sure if it means the typical ketubah, but it came in the context of marriage, of wanting to marry here. And that is what he sent ahead, showing that you are going to have that part called Goshen. The Medrash says even more. The Medrash says even more. The Askenim Balatesvus brings that if you read in the book of Yehoshua, in the book of Jeshua, it talks about all the lands, the areas in Israel that Yehoshua is dividing between the 12 tribes. Right? It's a big discussion in the book of Jeshua. Chapter 11, verse 16 in the book of Jeshua says, Vayikach Yeshua took Eskola Oretz Azois, the entire land, Ahar, Kol Negev, the south, Vet Kol Eretz HaGoshen, in the land of Goshen, and the Arava, and that land of Goshen is actually given to Yehuda. It names all the here's the Google, chapter 15, verse 51. All the cities that is being given to Yehuda is mentioned by name. And one of the names is Goshen. See it? Another name, Cholin. Goshen is one of the cities that Yehuda is getting. It's one of the cities conquered by Yeshua, a part of Israel. Given to Yehuda. Why Yehuda? Because Yehuda was the one who organized the settlement of Goshen and made it part of Israel. And it must be, as commentators say, all the way on the northern side of Egypt, coming very close to the entrance to Israel. Somehow, I don't know the maps exactly, Goshen was there, and that made it and was part of the Israeli cities, which is eventually owned by Yehuda. Which, in other words, before the Jewish people lived there, it was not part of Canaan, it was part of Egypt. But since it was given to Sarah as an inheritance, so therefore it later became part of Israel, and Yeshua never gave up on it. It belongs to us. If Sarah was granted Goshen legally by Pharaoh, the original Pharaoh, so we're not giving it up. And that's why it says, Vayal, he went up. Yosef went up to Mitzrayim to meet his father to Goshen. What is he going up to? Because Israel is higher than Egypt, and that's what you attribute the word ascending or climbing up. That's what the matter says. You never heard it. First time. I told you to keep on coming around. You might have something new. So be happy. Ashdod mentions too. Ashdod we know it in Israel. But you know that Goshen is mentioned. Goshen v'cholin. And that is what explains us that if you go back to the last verse on this week's Parsha, they settled in Goshen, and what does it say? Vayeochazu bo. What does Vayeochazu bo mean? They purchased land, they held on. Le'echoz in Hebrew means to have a grasp on it. What is the grasp that you have on Goshen? Because it's my Baba's. It's my it's my grandmother's place. It belongs to here. Imagine you take it to a place anywhere in the world, and you have the contracts and the legal papers, and that was what do we call it? Recorded in the country that this belongs to your Baba, and you are the direct inheritor of your Baba. You come in there, you would probably feel a certain comfort, hopefully that you can settle and make yourself a place there because that's what my Baba had. My Baba belongs.
For connection.
A connection.
Summer house.
But they didn't pay taxes.
And that's why it says Vayeochazu. Vayeochazu, they took held on it. Matter of fact, this is the book called Torah Moshe. Takes a lot of guts for someone to name his book Moses Torah. It was written by the famous Alshich. The Moshe Alshich was the famous rabbi at the time of the Bet Yosef and the Ari in the city of Tzfat. The Alshich actually brings this old medrash of Rachel on being Goshen. He brings to Pega the Rabbi Elazar, and he says even more. He says the Alshich, he says, because Sarah had it, Isa Shalom, Al Kain, he says, Koach HaTuma, asher haya chofef alea ka'al kol eretz Yisrael, nistalek mimena v'shalta kedusha ba. He says Egypt had a very big, unfortunate spirit of impurity. Goshen did not have it because the moment it was given to Sarah, and Sarah took possession of a Goshen, the tum'ah, the impurity which existed in Egypt, disappeared from Goshen, and it became penetrated with the spirit of holiness. And he brings the medrash just by Avram. When Avram purchased the cave of Machpelah from Ephron, it says in the verse, Vayakam Zdei Ephron. The field of Ephron stood up or rised. And Rashi says, what kind of expression is that the field stands up? It gets lifted up. Fields doesn't get lifted up. And Rashi says, Tkuma italo. There was a spiritual uplift took place to the field of Machpelah, because now it's not Ephron's, now it belongs to Avram, and it becomes designated as the Bet Kvarot, the Bet Chaim, for the cemetery for the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Same thing is here. And therefore he says, when Yosef sent to his father saying, don't be afraid that you and your children are going to be under the impurity of Egypt. It's not happening. Because v'yashavta be'eretz Goshen, I'm going to have you dwell in the land of Goshen, ki en sham tuma, there is no impurity, and this place is not going to stop you of being connected to you, neshama, soul experiences. And that's what he translates, Vayeochazu bo, they were able to hold on to their root, to their source of sanctity and holiness without being affected by the impurities of Egypt, because they are not in Egypt, they are in Goshen. Says the Alshich.
Did the Jews live in Goshen the whole time?
You saw by the plagues. That's why I proved you. But the plagues even. That was their place.
But then why does it say that the Bnei Israel went down to 49th level of Tuma?
We'll come to it. We'll come to it. So far, so good. We come down to Goshen. There is a yeshiva. There is Yaakov. Everything is everything is amazing. We are not even completely in Egypt. That's why the verse says, Eretz Mitzrayim, Eretz Goshen. It's almost like two lands. So like an autonomy in his own country, an autonomy of holiness and sanctity. Eventually it becomes Israel. Comes the Rebbe, and he asked a very obvious question on this old, beautiful presentation that we just made in the verses in the Medrash. And the Rebbe says, I have a simple question. Why are the Jews in Egypt? What got them to Egypt? It's not only because food, and it's not only because of Joseph. This goes back exactly to Parsha Lech Lecha. Abraham had a covenant with God, known as the covenant between the parts. All right? What? Chapter 15. Avram is having a whole vision, and it's called the covenant Brit Bein HaBetarim. Vayomer leAvram, and the first thing that God tells to Avram, Yodoa Teida, you should know, Ki ger iya zaracho be'eretz lo Elohem, that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. Va'avodum ve'inu oisom arba moishana, and they will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. I will also pronounce judgment, bringing 10 plagues on the nations that they will serve. And afterwards, they believe with great wealth. Clearly, there is a covenant that has to be materialized. The Jews are coming to our country, not theirs. Nothing to do with them, and being enslaved. The Jews are making that covenant happen. That's the story of Egypt. That's the story of Joseph in Egypt. But after this beautiful, exciting presentation about Goshen, so then you wonder, they were actually, first of all, not in a land not theirs. There was theirs, because it was belonging to Sarah, the Bobby. So it is theirs. It's a family-owned piece of property. A nice suburb in Egypt called Goshen, which belongs to Sarah. Number two, they weren't enslaved there. They were living a very good life. Made Tavor, a matter of fact, next week's Parsha begins, Vayichi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim 17 shana. Yaakov lived 17 years, and the Targum, the Balaturim says that Yaakov lived his best years of his life was in the land of Mitzrayim, which is basically in Goshen. So what's going on? Is it a decree that needs to take place? Or they are living in a very nice, comfortable, Hawaiian island, and even belonging to them. They don't even pay for the hotel. That's theirs. And for sure not enslaved. How does that fit with the 400-year message? What do you mean both?
It's both of those together.
No, there's no both. They're living by Yerochazubah. First of all, if you live in a place and you inflict it in pain, you don't have children like this. It seems that they were living a good life. What else can we do? Let's have children. That's what the verse said, the last verse in Vayigash. The families. Because life is good. That's a different type of... no, for sure there was infliction. But what happened now? Now is also part of... How do you count the 400? So there's all kinds of explanations, but the bottom line is for sure the years that Jacob came down to Egypt is for sure, according to all opinions, counted in the 400 and in the 210 years of enslavement. No one argues on whether you're going to start the calculation from when Yitzchak was born, or when Yitzchak got married, or when Yitzchak had Jacob, or whatever cheshbonos is the different commentaries make to come up with the 400 years. Now, clearly, it is this time of arriving in Egypt is already for sure counted as what? As Golus, as exile. But it doesn't seem as any exile. That's the question. So the Rebbe says, first of all, very simple. There is Israel and there's the rest of the world. You can be in Goshen, it can be Sarah's inheritance, but it's in Egypt. It's not Israel. Eventually it will become Israel. At this point, it's not Israel. For the holy tribes of Jacob, not to be in Israel is not to be home. You can give me the best experience, I'm not home. Not only I'm not home, I'm in pain for not being home. I'm in a place where I don't belong. I live here without roots. I feel it like a mushroom. I have no relationship and no connection to the place. The place is good, but there's nothing to do with me. The place that I belong is the land where the Torah says, Einei Hashem Elokecha ba mireis shana ve'ad achri shana. The land that God's eyes gaze on it from the beginning to the end of the year, the way it's being described in the book of the Torah. Israel is the home and the place where God's eyes look after it. Everywhere else, God is obviously here. God's presence is everywhere, but in a different relationship. In concealment, in channels, not the presence of God with his eyes upon it, the way it is written in regard to this. So for the tribes, if you wonder, you in Goshen, Sarah's inheritance, life is good, and you say, well, God decreed they should be in a land not theirs. Is that happening? 100%. They are in a land not theirs, and especially they lived with that feel, with that attitude, with that constant reminder, we are not home. Because they came from that home. They knew what it means to be in Israel. Now we are amongst next door to all the goyim in Mitzrayim. That's who we are. Called the depth of the land. So that answers the question of being in a land not theirs. But what about what it says that they are going to be enslaved? How is the enslavement taking place if they are not even slaves? So the Rebbe brings for the Alter Rebbe in the Kutin Torah or writes from the Zohar. It was a very interesting Zohar. The Zohar basically says that when God decreed toiling, laboring, backbreaking work, it's all true, but it did not have to be working in the fields and creating bricks out of mortar. It could have been materialized by breaking your head and your neck and your back in trying to learn words of Torah and try to understand them. That is labor. This is hard work, and you would have been just fine in fulfilling that vision of what Avram saw in the covenant between the parties. The Zohar actually says the words the Torah uses later in Chumash Shmot, bechomer. Chomer means mortar. But the Zohar says chomer can mean mortar, but chomer is also a term which is being used as one of the principles of teaching Torah called kal vachomer. So chomer is kal vachomer. Levenim means bricks, but levenim can also mean, as the Zohar, libun alacha. When you have to clarify and develop a concept in halacha to make full sense and meaning of it, it's also called libun. You fire up a whole system in order to come to some conclusion. Avoida basada, everything of labor did not have to be bricks and mortar. You have to work hard. True. God made the decree, we're going to be in not our land and work hard. Working hard in where? Working hard in the yeshiva that Yaakov had established in Goshen. There's a yeshiva there. There is books, there is material, and we got to break our head to learn and understand what is those teachings and how we explain them and how we understand them. And you would be perfectly experiencing exile in not your homeland while being enslaved and working very hard.
So, but working very hard is different than being enslaved. Because enslaved means like sort of like
Enslaved to
doing it by
God.
choice.
Enslaved to God. Subjected to God. You know, there's an expression in Ethics of Our Fathers. What it says, המקבל עליו עול תורה, מעבירים ממנו עול מלכות ועול דרך ארץ. If you take upon yourself the yoke of Torah, will be removed from you the yoke of royalty in society. What is the yoke of Torah mean? Torah. No, Torah is not just sitting one foot on the other and on a nice summer beach chair with a margarita in one hand and having another article about the Talmud in another hand to say, oh, I'm experiencing Torah. It's learning. Torah means you sit and you read and you say, I don't understand. What does it mean again? And you try again, and you try again, and eventually the doctor prescribes you glasses. And you have to raise the number of glasses because you toiled.
So do you study easier and better in Eretz Israel than you do outside of
It actually says that there is no Torah like the Torah of Israel. Look, in Israel, modern day Israel might be polluted because of, there's no temple, and they are also a part of exile. But the idea is that it's very clear that we are in a state of work. Eventually, what happened was the tribes passed on. The original generation moved on. Not everybody is toiling in Torah. The pain that you have that you're not in Israel was slowly forgotten. When that stopped functioning, came in what? The practical way of labor. This is when Paro's decree started. We learn later in the Parsha, Vayigash and Shmot, until Levi. Levi was the last son of Jacob's sons who died. He lived the longest. Until he passed away, there was not real enslavement. The old enslavement of Egypt, the real problem was not more than 86 years. Not 210 years. What happened 210 years? They labored. But they labored on a piece of Gemara and trying to understand the Maimer of Hasidus, of trying to understand an insight in Kabbalah.
Did they move out? Did a lot of Jews move out of Goshen?
Doesn't necessarily, not sure. Could be the old stadium. Doesn't say they moved out. It doesn't say they moved out. It doesn't say they moved out.
So they started assimilating after the David.
Everything started then. Yeah. You can be in Goshen, and while you're in yeshiva, you are able to learn, to be in Israel, in a sense. There's a famous Gemara I mentioned sometimes, talks about Rabbi Yochanan, who was in Israel, and somebody came to visit them from Babylonia. And Rabbi Yochanan asked him what's going on in Babylonia, and he told him about the elderly people who live there. And he says, how is it possible to have elderly people in Babylonia when it says in the Shema, Leman irbu yemeichem v'mei bneichem ala adama shenishba Hashem lavisechem, that you're only going to have a prolonged life on the earth that I swore to your ancestors, which was in Israel. How can there be people with a long life? My father just died, Baruch Hashem. How can you have people in a long life in what's it called in they even became fruitful and multiplied in Goshen. But at the time when Goshen was not anymore a place for them to, as once Goshen was not anymore a place for them to be, because they didn't toil and toil anymore, and they did not feel that Israel is their homeland and they have to miss it. So that became, Pharaoh's decree became very clear. I saw something very beautiful, and I'm going to show it to you. Yom Kippur War, this is 50 years ago. So then there was a ceasefire between Israel and Egypt. IDF crossed the Suez Canal. They came to the 101 kilometer from Cairo, and in a place called Faid is where they established a base. About a half a year, IDF had a very strong base in Faid, and until they decided to separate the armies, while being in Faid, they opened a yeshiva. Faid is in Egypt. And you know what they call the yeshiva? They call the yeshiva Yeshiva's Goshen. The Goshen Yeshiva. And one of the soldiers records that initially he writes, we thought that if in this yeshiva one soldier will learn one day, it was worth it. He says practically we had thousands of soldiers who studied there for about 3 months. And they obviously choose the name Goshen based on this medrash that Yaakov sent Yehuda to open in Egypt, a yeshiva, and they felt this is a proper symbol for our presence in Egypt, is to open a yeshiva. He said there was a regular yeshiva with learning, with Gemara, Halacha. First they had very little books, then somebody donated more books. And till Passover, about a half a year, they learned in this yeshiva called Goshen. Then they moved back, just like their ancestors moved, left the ocean and returned to Israel. So I saw a booklet that somebody publicized that he writes, I received that Kibalti in Yeshivat Goshen in Faid of Egypt, 1973. And there is a stamp of the yeshiva. What does it say over here? Yeshivat Goshen, Faid Mitzrayim. The Goshen Yeshiva in Faid, Egypt. Wow. That's the Jewish people. Mika Amchisol. They come, they get reconnected to whatever they started, and that's what the yeshiva is, Yeshivat Goshen. Yeshivas Goshen, Yeshivas Bellevue, Yeshivas Aza, Yeshivas Khan Yunis, whatever, Jabalia, wherever Yidden go, they open a yeshiva. See, 1973, Yeshivat Goshen, Faid. Remember 73?
Oh, yeah.
Yeshiva's Goshen. Huh?
Almost.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a Laila Tov. Have a good night. Keep on learning, wherever you are, be in yeshiva. Next week, the class is going to be on Zoom only. Okay? I'm not going to be here Wednesday night to come in. Thank you very much.
We also have a Zoom on Friday.